Here we are with another 1100 rating game from Chess24 I was involved in. Again, it's of interest because there's a nice checkmate at the end, but also helping me practice here my analysis and commentating skills, such as they are. Anyway, my opponent playing white played d4. I replied with knight to f6, not wanting to be obvious and stick a pawn out. The idea always is to get your opponent thinking. So he played knight to c3. I replied with d5. I think it's a pretty standard traditional opening here. In many ways, my opponent went g5, intending to mess up my pawn structure by grabbing the knight. But I have my own plans, and I went bishop to f5, angling into the heart of his position, and also intending I can bring my pawn to e6. Then my opponent knight to f3 and knight to c6, all pretty standard stuff. My opponent locks his pawn behind the bishop, and I do exactly the same. So there we are. Bishop to e2, just quiet development from my opponent. Now, I don't mind, again, I've said this several times, messing up my own king-side pawn structure, because I often put castle queen-side, which tends to throw opponents. At least I hope they will. So in this case, the bishop has to go back to h4. I then g5, again, chasing the bishop down the board. Now, white bishop to g3, I go to bishop to d6, challenging that bishop, and again trying to mess up with his kingside fortress, if you like. He then castles, doesn't mind me about to mash into that formation. Bishop takes g3, and then f takes g3, giving him a nice, I guess the rook is angling up into my position, so that's fine. I'm a bit worried at this stage about his knight coming in, by the way, to b5, so I play a6. Again, this is a real-world game, I should emphasise, so this is not necessarily the very best moves, it's what was played in the actual game. Rook to e1, I'm not quite sure what he was angling at there. Obviously, he's ultimately going to push the pawn to e4, but there we are. Developing my queen and also making sure I can castle queenside, queen to d6. Queen to d2, just again quiet development. I'm not quite sure if he's got an actual plan at this point, but either way I'm going to castle queenside, which I do. Rook a to d1 from my opponent, obviously backing up the centre. Not too worried about his pawns, clearly on the a and b file, but that's fine. Now, this is where I start to really try and attack, and it doesn't always work, but there we are. Knight to g4, spearing in, attacking this pawn here, and also maybe thinking about one day sacrificing or doing something on the h-file. He carries on with his own plan, in this case, pawn to e4, attacking my bishop, and I take it with the bishop, and it's expecting him to do some kind of exchange, and indeed, knight takes e4, and of course I recapture with the pawn. D takes c4, knight to e5. In theory a nice outpost, but of course I've got a knight willing to exchange it, which I immediately do. And then d takes e5. Now he's now offering an exchange of queens, but I don't want it. I want to recapture the pawn and carry on with an attack. He carries on wanting an exchange of queens, clearly fearing I'm in the ascendant. With queen to c3, I reply queen to f5. Threatening some rather nasty things down on the second rank, which I'm not sure he spotted, but there we are. Either way, he wants to simplify. So rook takes d8, check. Rook takes d8, recaptures. Rook to d1, he thinks, well, I protect it with the bishop, and he can now carry on doing another exchange if he wants to. However, he has forgotten or overlooked that I can do queen to f2, check. Maybe he's not worried about a back rank mate because he's got the rook. But of course he was about to change them anyway, and I think he's getting confused at this point. So of course king has to go to h1, and I can simply do rook takes d1 check. He does recapture with the bishop, which was protecting that square, but unfortunately I can now just do queen down to f1, and that is checkmate, and nothing can get in between. So a nice little checkmate in the end. Hope this was of some interest. I'm going to carry on with some more games very soon.